the biggest democratic exercise in the world. Team NDTV covers it from ground zero.
BJP really had to fight a tough election this time.
Unprecedented exercise. Unmatched coverage.
There is no dispute. जनता को decide करना है.
From polling to counting, NDTV brought you the most trustworthy news and updates. Elections mean NDTV.
Get ready for the ride of your life. NDTV brings you the NDTV Auto Show with me, Mugdha Mishra. From the fastest supercars to the sleekest new energy vehicles to your trusted daily ride, we cover it all. Every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and Sunday at 8:30 p.m. only on NDTV 24/7. Your next great escape starts here.
NDTV proudly upholds its legacy of trust and credibility. According to the prestigious Reuters Institute's Digital News Report 2024, NDTV is the topmost news platform in the
A very good morning. You're watching World 24/7. We have a whole lot lined up for you, including the headlines, which includes Julian Assange, who's been freed to take up that plea in the United States. Let's get you first the headlines. Julian Assange freed in the US plea deal. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to plead guilty in the deal with the United States. He's agreed to plead guilty in exchange for release. Israel Prime Minister says the intense phase of the Gaza war is nearing its end and Netanyahu turns his attention to Hezbollah's threat. Tories launch inquiry into election date betting, suspected illegal betting by party members, and Rishi Sunak has reacted saying that he is not being investigated. And the work begins to connect India to the Middle East. We're talking about that corridor between India and the Middle East, and India has set a deadline of 100 days to complete the first leg of the project. And the T20 World Cup, India beat Australia by 24 runs, and India has now reached the semi-finals. Let's get to your top story, and that's the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who will plead guilty to a felony charge in a deal with the United States Justice Department that will resolve a long-running legal saga that spanned multiple continents and centered on the publication of a trove of classified documents, according to the court papers that were filed on Monday. Assange is scheduled to appear in the federal court in Mariana Islands, a U.S. Commonwealth in the Western Pacific, to plead guilty to an Espionage Act charge of conspiring to unlawfully obtain and disseminate classified national defense information, the Justice Department said in a letter that was filed in court. Under the terms of the new agreement, the Justice Department prosecutor will seek a 62-month sentence, which is basically equal to the amount of time that Assange has already served in a high-security prison in London while he fought extradition to the United States. The deal plea would credit that time served, allowing Assange to immediately return to Australia. That's his native country. The guilty plea, which must be approved by a judge. Now, Assange had been released from UK as of yesterday. He's expected to return to Australia after his plea and sentencing, which is scheduled for Wednesday morning. The hearing is taking place there because of Assange's opposition to travelling to the continent of the United States and the court's proximity to his native place, that is Australia. In other news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the current phase of fighting against Hamas in Gaza is winding down, setting the stage for Israel to send more troops to its northern border to confront the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. The comments threaten to further heighten the tension between Israel and Hezbollah at a time when they appear to be moving closer to war. Netanyahu also signaled that there is no end in sight for the grinding war in Gaza. The Israeli leader said in a lengthy TV interview that while the army is close to completing its current ground offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, that would not mean that the war against Hamas is over. But he said fewer troops would be needed in Gaza freeing up forces to battle Hezbollah. The Iranian-backed Hezbollah began striking Israel almost immediately after Hamas's attack. This was the cross-border attack that triggered the Gaza war on the 7th of October last year. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging fire nearly every day since then, but the fighting has escalated in recent weeks, raising fears of a full-blown war. Hezbollah is much stronger than Hamas, and opening a new front would raise the risk of a larger regional-wide war involving other Iranian proxies and perhaps Iran itself that could cause heavy damage and mass casualties on both sides of the border. Hezbollah said that it will continue battling as far as Israel under a ceasefire is reached in Gaza.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to the north. Netanyahu says that as the current phase of fighting in Gaza winds down, Israel will soon be able to deploy more and more forces along its northern border to prepare for confrontation with the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Hezbollah began attacking Israel last October, almost immediately after the war in Gaza erupted. And since then, there have been exchanges of fire nearly every day. But these exchanges, along with the rhetoric between these two enemies, have intensified in recent weeks, and there are now concerns on both sides of the border that a full-blown war is approaching. Hezbollah is far more powerful than Hamas, and a war between Israel and Hezbollah could be devastating to the region. Hezbollah is believed to possess a collection of rockets and missiles that are capable of striking anywhere in Israel. The Israeli military, meanwhile, says it has prepared plans for an offensive in Lebanon, and Israeli leaders have said the scenes of destruction in Gaza could soon be repeated inside Lebanon. Now, Netanyahu says he's hoping for a diplomatic solution to this standoff, but he says that Israel is prepared to go to war if that's what it takes to restore quiet along its northern front.
And to get more on this, we have Linda Gradstein, a reporter of Voice of America, joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on NDTV. Linda, what is your reading of the current situation as far as the Lebanon border is concerned, as war looms along Lebanon's border? How do you see this unfold? What is your reading of it?
So first of all, I think it is a serious issue that this UAV was able to get in and get this drone footage. And it's a sign, I think, that Israel and Hezbollah are kind of playing this game of chicken, you know, kind of pushing each other's buttons, trying to each do things that they know will annoy the other, but stop short of a full war. The truth is that Israel and Hezbollah have been on the verge of a war since October 8th, when one day after Hamas, attacked Israel, Hezbollah then joined in. At the same time, it seems pretty clear that they've sort of tried to hold back a little bit.
Well, Linda, also thousands of Iran-backed fighters have now offered to join Hezbollah in its fight against Israel. If that happens, how will the United States react?
So that's the question. I mean, if Iran joins the war, would the United States then join the war to protect Israel? Up until now, Iran has preferred to act mostly through proxies. There was one time in April when Iran fired dozens of rockets at Israel, but they didn't do that much damage and nobody was killed, and then the situation kind of settled down. I don't think Iran really wants a war with Israel. It wants to use its proxies to carry out a war with Israel and then have them pay the price of the Israeli response.
Right, Linda, also we've seen Netanyahu, he's done multiple flip-flops on the hostage negotiations. Netanyahu is now facing a backlash to comments on ceasefire deal as hostage families release a new video. What does this video contain?
Well, first of all, just in the last few minutes, in fact, the families of 3 of the hostages released video that's never been shown before of their abduction that came from the GoPros that the Hamas terrorists were wearing, and it showed the 3 hostages looking terrified, being loaded and wounded. They were bloodied, loaded onto a flatbed truck. And the hostage families released a statement saying that they're releasing this video because it's such an indictment of the fact that Israel has failed to, get them freed for more than 260 days. So I think there's definitely worry in Israel that the longer time goes on, more hostages are dying, whether by Hamas itself, whether by neglect and the conditions.
Well, Linda, can we expect snap elections to unseat Netanyahu?
Well, the polls show that he does not have a lot of support, that the public is very frustrated with the way that he's run this, with the intelligence failure that allowed October 7th to happen. It's quite amazing how and the fact that it took several days for Israel to retake some of those communities that were on the border with Gaza that were taken over by Hamas, that it took, rather than hours, it took days to retake them, and the loss of life. I mean, I think the country is still really traumatized by October 7th. And, Netanyahu has refused to take responsibility. That said, polls show that in an election he would not win.
Right. Thank you so much, Linda Gradstein, for joining us from Jerusalem. Moving on, the UK Conservative Party is conducting its own investigation into suspected illegal betting by party members on the timing of the general election. It's an embarrassing admission for the governing party in the last few days of the UK parliamentary election campaign as it tries to narrow the 20% point gap between it and the opposition Labour Party. Now, UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says that his party will act on any relevant findings or information. He's also gone on to say that he is not being investigated. Stuart Smith of NDTV has more from London.
For the Conservative Party, who seem to, these days, resemble something of an organised betting ring. The sheer level of greed and stupidity that leads people right at the heart of government, who know when the election's going to be called to put on bets, is astonishing, but perhaps sums up the self-entitled view that this Conservative Party has after 14 years in government. There's been a fifth person named this morning, but I'll bet you that's the tip of the iceberg, because all we've seen is the Betfair data, because it's available online. I wonder how many people were running into betting shops with 100 quid, 200 quid, 500 quid. This scandal will get worse. But I hear that Rishi Sunak is on the verge of doing something very decisive about it. I understand this afternoon he'll announce that we're leaving the Gambling Commission.
Two parliamentary candidates, two senior Conservative Party officials and one of the Prime Minister's close protection officers are under investigation by the UK's Gambling Commission. And at the weekend there were reports it has expanded its investigation into alleged illegal betting by others, using inside information about the date of the general election, which had been a closely guarded secret. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was forced to deny he was under investigation and assured the press that he had not made any bets on political outcomes since becoming a lawmaker in 2015. A former Conservative cabinet minister said he believes the Prime Minister should suspend the two parliamentary candidates who are being investigated and that the government should ban politicians and party officials placing bets on politics to avoid such a situation happening again. The Labour Party leader and likely new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has suggested he wouldn't change the rules if he gets into power, claiming it's not the rules that are the problem. Reform Party leader Nigel Farage said the sheer level of greed and stupidity at the centre of government was astonishing. He got into a spat with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Monday. Johnson accused Nigel Farage of nauseating ahistorical drivel and more Kremlin propaganda after Farage attempted to argue that Western nations had provoked Russian President Vladimir Putin into invading Ukraine. Nigel Farage later said Boris Johnson would go down in history as the worst Prime Minister of modern times. Farage, who led the campaign to leave the European Union, blames Johnson for squandering Brexit. Although Johnson's not actively campaigning on the streets, he has been drafted in by the Conservative Party to record promotional videos for parliamentary candidates in the hope his relative popularity with voters can sway the tide, which remains firmly against the governing party with just over a week until the election. Stuart Smith, NDTV, London.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for getting us all those details. In other news, from Mecca to the United States to Mexico, temperatures are off the charts. According to a new study, extreme heat across parts of Central America and the southern United States in May and early June has 35 times more likely a chance because it was a human-caused global warming. The unusually early heat wave in the United States has shattered temperatures as far as records are concerned across the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic states and the Midwest as well. My colleague Vishal has the details.
From India and Pakistan to the US and Mexico, the heat wave is not sparing anyone. May was the Earth's 12th consecutive month of record-breaking temperatures. The global average temperature for May 2024 is 1.52 degrees Celsius above the estimated average for May during the pre-industrial period of 1850 to 1900, highlighting the long-term impact of global warming. According to reports, India's severe heat wave this summer is suspected to have killed at least 100 people and made tens of thousands ill. The chokehold of heat wave is slowly tightening in the US as it covers the Midwest and northeastern part of the country. Officials in the US warn that the high temperatures could prove deadly. About 80 million people in the US are facing an excessive heat warning at the moment.
So when you do get a heat wave, what it does to the atmosphere is it makes the air expand. So when the air expands, it creates a dome, which is why you call it a heat dome when you happen to have a heat wave. So there's a big area of high pressure that's bulged outwards, forming a dome. That's all that means when you're calling it a heat dome. It's a heat wave by, any definition you want to give.
Exposure to high temperatures can cause dehydration, heat stroke, and heat exhaustion. It can also worsen heart issues and other pre-existing conditions. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, heat contributed to the deaths of more than 2,300 Americans in 2023. The number of these deaths has more than doubled in just the past 5 years. Though heat wave doesn't appear to have the dramatic backdrop of natural disasters such as earthquake and floods, the effects do tend to be widespread. With Vishal Vivek, Kartikeya Bhattacharya for NDTV.
And to get more on this, we have climate expert Jose Alvaro Silva of the WMO joining us from Lisbon. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on NDTV. What's driving these extreme temperatures in the United States? And also, we're talking about Mecca to even Mexico.
So, yeah, this excessive high temperatures in many regions of the world is something that we are witnessing some months ago, but now with the Northern Hemisphere summer are impacting several regions in America, Europe, Asia, Africa. So it's a widespread hot temperatures, exceptionally high for this time of the year. And we know that heat waves are increasingly being more intense and frequent due to human-induced climate change. This is the main contributing factor.
Jose, we've also seen that many elderly died in Hajj due to heat wave. What precautions can one take? What are the most vulnerable parts of the population? And what are some of the health risks as far as these situations are concerned?
Yeah, so with some temperatures reaching 50 degrees and more, especially in the Middle East. In Kuwait, we are now in the 8th day of temperatures above 50 degrees. But not only the maximum temperatures are a concern, also the minimum temperatures during the night are also exceptionally high. Under these conditions, people should avoid to go outdoors. Of course, then the people most at risk are the elderly people, people with health conditions, and of course, people that need to stay outdoors. And this is something that should be avoid when we have these heat waves with temperatures above 40 and 45 degrees.
Well, Jose, also apart from heat wave, freak weather or extreme weather cases are also becoming common across the world, from floods, tornadoes and more. Is this likely to be the new norm?
Yeah, so in fact, it's not only the extreme heat and the heat waves that are more likely with climate change. Climate change also leads to increasing frequency and intensity of other weather and climate extremes, such as heavy rainfall. A warmer atmosphere is capable of holding more moisture content. And when there are the conditions to storms to develop and to heavy rainfall events, these are more intense and leads to more severe flooding over many areas of the world.
Right. So, Jose, when we talk about such high temperatures that are also leading to rising sea levels, we just saw Panama becoming the first country to evacuate an island due to climate change. How dangerous is this situation? How many regions are vulnerable to this?
The increasing temperature and global warming is just perhaps the most visible face of climate change. But climate change is not only about temperature. It's also about sea level rise. So the ocean warms, and when ocean warms, it expands. So we get important contribution from this thermal expansion of the ocean. But also the melting glaciers and ice sheets provide additional water to the ocean, and this leads to again an important contribution to sea level rise.
Right, Jose, what do countries need to do in order to reverse the impact of climate change at a time that we're seeing record low levels of climate funding?
Rise, as we talked about, and it's up to the countries to increase their ambitions in terms of reducing greenhouse gases. It's very important to keep the Paris Agreement goal alive, to get global warming and increasing of global temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius. And with current pledges and with current politics, it's not possible to see this will happen. So it's important to increase ambition, and this needs to be a global undertake by all countries.
Right. Thank you so much, Jose Alvaro Silva from the WMO, for speaking to us here on NDTV. In other news, 9 months after the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor project that was announced, now the link to India and the Europe through the Arabian Peninsula via sea and rail links work has begun to operationalize the first leg of the corridor between the UAE and India. Now, this is a corridor that will also be extended further, not just till the UAE, but also to Italy, France, Germany and the European Union, that had come together last September in New Delhi during the G20 summit to launch the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. The corridor involves transit by ship between India, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, followed by a rail link to Jordan, from where the shipment will move by sea again to Turkey and further by rail to Europe. The issue also came up for discussion during the recently concluded visit of the External Affairs Minister. He was in the United Arab Emirates over the weekend. To get more on this, we have my colleague Ghazali joining us. Ghazali, the Israel-Hamas war had halted the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, but this is 9 months after its announcement. The work has finally begun.
Yeah, first once it was conceptualized in September during the G20 summit, then most of the experts or those who know the India-Gulf relations also said that perhaps this IMEC corridor, as it's called, India Middle East Europe corridor, will have its own challenges. It has its own operational challenges, but besides the operational challenges, the biggest challenge was the October 7 attack. And after October 7 attack, most of the European partners in this Middle East and Europe corridor went quiet on this entire project, but this got its backing in the G7 summit recently in Italy, when countries like US, UK, and even France and Germany, they all backed that this corridor should be operationalized, or work should begin on this corridor. And finally, India has taken the lead on this Middle East European corridor by starting or taking an ambitious target of finishing the first leg of connectivity between the seaports of India and the UAE. And now questions are often asked that why India is interested in India Middle East European corridor after investing in Chabahar port or also in the north-south transit corridor. Experts say that perhaps this is not something like a competition to these two transit routes, or say the export routes between India and Iran or towards the Middle East, but this is perhaps a kind of a complement to these two routes. This is also an alternate route which not just connects to the Middle East, but also moves towards Jordan and Israel, the two key partners of India in the Middle East. So in some way or the other, this India Middle East European corridor will help not only the Indian companies or India investment in India, but will also sort of further India's reach in the European world as well.
Right, Ghazali, like you mentioned, so it's not just going to be the Middle East. It promises to connect India with the Eastern Mediterranean as well as the western part of Europe. Now, like you mentioned, there's a 100-day deadline that has been set as far as the first leg of the corridor is concerned. And that is a promise that's been made by the new government. Of course, it is Modi 3.0. Take us through, is there any target when it comes to the remaining part of the corridor?
Sorry, can you repeat, Divya? I just missed the question there.
Right, I'm just saying that we have a 100-day deadline that has been set by Modi's government. You know, is there a target when it comes to the remaining part of the corridor as well?
Yeah, so this involves two parts. One is the seaport connectivity, and there are areas where Indian railway network will also operate in the desert areas of the Middle East or in the Arabian Peninsula. So the first ambitious target is of 100 days to first starts the operationalization of the first part of the project, which is the seaport of India, which will connect either from Mundra, Kandla or Nhava ports, Nhava Sheva ports with the ports in the UAE. So that is the first leg of this project, which has to be operationalized. And after that, there will be participation of other countries who are the signatory of this MOU or the Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed during the G20 summit. And after their coordination, perhaps the future legs or the remaining portion or part of this corridor will be constructed with the coordination of those countries, where either the rail network has to be let down or where this seaport connectivity has to be established.
Right, Ghazali, before I let you go, just take us through the significance as far as India is concerned and this corridor.
See, there are two things. One, that it builds on existing trade and economic relations between India and the Gulf region. And why we know that why it is very important is that we saw Mr. Jaishankar visiting UAE recently. It was his second foreign trip as a foreign minister after assuming the office there. And India has had old and very cultural ties with the Middle East or the Gulf region. Now, to reinforce that, it was conceptualized that though there are existing routes available on the route, which connects India to the Middle East, but this time around, India is bypassing the Chabahar or the Iranian region and moving into the Middle East directly via UAE, Saudi, Jordan, and other key allies in the Middle East. And we know that Middle East is on the boil, and perhaps India is also eyeing to sort of play a role of a greater superpower there, to have involvement in the Middle East as well.
Thanks so much, Ghazali, for joining us with all those details. With that, we're slipping into a very short break. Back with a whole lot more.
Some people say the metaverse will only be virtual. One day this lecture hall will be made of code, and driverless cars would be trapped in intersections. But even in this maze of the future, you can't wish away health. It's time to become more resilient. 10 years of Banega Swasth India, we have grown and achieved so many milestones. And now I have a plan to beat the urgency, to stop breathing with difficulty, to relieve getting choked with inactivity. Energize our government, our environment, our society, and ourselves. Everyone, everywhere, every day. Banega Swasth India. One world hygiene.
Stay informed and entertained with the new and updated NDTV News app. You can watch all our channels live, listen to podcasts, read breaking and exclusive news from around the world and more. Download the NDTV app today and get access to the best journalism and storytelling on your smartphone or tablet. The NDTV app. News that matters to you.
The biggest democratic exercise in the world. Team NDTV covers it from ground zero.
BJP really had to fight a tough election this time.
Unprecedented exercise. Unmatched coverage.
There is no dispute. जनता को decide करना है.
From polling to counting, NDTV.
This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Hello, Moto.
A very good morning. You're watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Divya Vatwa. We have a whole lot lined up for you over the next 1 hour, including the show of strength as the Parliament met for the first time on Monday. MPs of the India bloc held up copies of the Constitution and raised slogans inside the Parliament complex, with the BJP all set to challenge that narrative. We have also lots happening on the bulletin. Let's first get you the headlines. The BJP to challenge Congress's constitution narrative, nationwide protests on the emergency anniversary. All eyes on the Speaker's nomination with the key meet that took place between BJP President JP Nadda and Amit Shah. Well, who will be the new nominee as far as the NDA is concerned for the Speaker's post? That is the big question. In the neat muddle, the focus is on Bihar Police's investigation. There was a 7-hour-long meeting between the CBI, the Bihar Police in Patna. The CBI may file multiple cases, take 18 accused to the national capital. Delhi High Court to decide whether